Welcome to the Powersharing series, People, Computers, and You. Produced on audio cassettes between 1982 and 1991, the series consists of over 100 presentations by computer pioneers at computer user groups, the Boston Computer Society, and the Computer Museum in Boston. I'm Charles Mann, creator of the series. I spent most of my working life as an international development economist at the Rockefeller Foundation and Harvard University. I began the series in 1982 and continued it through 1991 over many nights and weekends. It all began in 1982 when I co-produced a video series to introduce the Apple II at a training workshop I had organized in Tunisia.
The words power and sharing capture much of what the microcomputer revolution is all about. It is the power to remember and to organize, the power to calculate, the power to seek patterns, the power to entertain and to amuse, the power to teach skills. In part, this power is a product of microelectronics, but importantly, it is also a product of sharing ideas, sharing problems and their solutions, sharing enthusiasms. Through the sharing of thousands of individuals, the power grew as new programs were created. Greater power to analyze, to communicate, to create. This series is about the power and about the sharing.
Here is the story behind that video series. Following a 4-year field assignment with the Rockefeller Foundation Wheat Project in Turkey, I returned to headquarters in New York to lead a new foundation project in food policy. Thanks to my participation in the Big Apple Users Group, the BOG, I came to realize how much an Apple II computer with VisiCalc could help some of our projects. In 1982, I added 2 Apple II computer systems to our food policy project in Tunisia. With the Tunisians, I planned a workshop to educate together both the office staff and the managers so all could see how fundamentally these systems could change their work. For the workshop, I enlisted John and Barbara McMullen, both gifted teachers at New York's New School for Social Research and also the president and secretary of the BOG. I knew that the workshop was going to be a big success. However, my boss had to approve their travel, and this was his idea of Apple computers. "No way," he said, "will I send a husband and wife team to the beach in Tunisia for such a workshop." Desperate for a plan B, I called Martha Stewart, acclaimed producer of the video series Are You Listening, and my video mentor. Explaining the situation, I asked if she would ever consider making a training film for the Apple II with John and Barbara. "I love it," she said. "If you can pay for the equipment, I'll provide the staff and do the shoot." For the workshop, we produced a 3-hour video series. Following the workshop, we condensed that longer version into a 50-minute VHS cassette that Martha marketed within the US. That was the birth of the Powersharing series. About a year later, with the UN International School and others, the BOG organized a weekend computer fair with about 30 really amazing speakers. With such a gathering of computer superstars, I volunteered to organize recording all of them. Some of these recordings I decided to produce on audio cassettes, and they became the seeds that regenerated the Powersharing series.
I proposed the Apple I to the company I was working for, Hewlett Packard, and they just sat there and they couldn't quite do a $1,000 computer. They lost a lot of sleep thinking about it, but it wasn't a Hewlett-Packard product.
When I moved to Boston in 1985 to take a new job with Harvard, there were many new possibilities for recording really amazing speakers. I worked with Jonathan Rutenberg, the founding president of the Boston Computer Society, to arrange to record the monthly meetings of the Boston Computer Society. I also arranged with Computer Museum founding director Gwen Bell to include the museum's Pioneer Lecture Series. While my day job continued to center on food policy, it expanded to include the role of computers in development. That interest and my study of how people learn things led me to develop a resource guide for the series that highlighted the educational use of these recordings.
Then they'd decide, well, let's replace this by something else, and they'd go through a very different process, which, rather than like this top-down planning, is more like sculpting.
I narrate context, graphics, and inexplicable outbursts.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. Last time we were here, it was when we were showing a beta test of SuperKey, and it crashed 3 times during the demo. So when I want to go to lunch, I just type Alt-L, and it says enter lock keyword. So for example, I say ASDF. That's my lock word. It'll ask me to reconfirm. And that's it. So at this time, so you see, seriously, at this time, I can take my keyboard and go this way.
He's strumming his keyboard like a guitar player. But on the screen, I can't believe it, on the screen is a whole jumble of letters flying around, moving around, up and down the screen around.
I can press.
He's sitting there looking completely surprised by this development on the screen.
Well, obviously something didn't work. And I'm not going to say it's a feature, it's a bug.
I commissioned a set of drawings by fine artist Ann Leggett. There was some encouraging feedback. A favorable review led some libraries to add the series to their collections. In 1991, I had to stop work on the series when Harvard posted me on a long-term assignment to Africa. I placed the recordings and all the equipment into long-term storage, including an unedited backlog of about 30 recordings. When I retired from Harvard in 2002, I was fortunate to be able to start a second career as an educational documentary filmmaker. Powersharing stayed in deep storage. When finally I returned to work on the series in 2014, I began by digging out my old PageMaker 3 files for the 1990 edition of the Powersharing Resource Guide. With many purchases from eBay's legacy computer department, I eventually put together what was needed to take those files through many transformations and into contemporary Adobe InDesign. That allowed me to update and republish the original guide. It was a real trip down memory lane. Recently, with help from the Computer History Museum, especially trustees Gordon Bell and Gardner Hendry, I have returned to the series, and the museum is now home to all of the program masters and audio source tapes for the full series, both analog and digital. With media designer Bill Shea, I am now working on a final digital edition that will be available on Amazon.com. The full series in time will be posted on the Computer History Museum's website. We are deeply committed to bringing to new audiences the excitement and the visions that characterized those early years of the personal computer era, and bringing them just as the original audiences heard them at these events so many years ago.
Hello, I'm Charles Mann, editor and host of the Powersharing series, Professionals Sharing Knowledge. For this program in our Evenings with the Boston Computer Society, we are in Boston's Symphony Hall, where a huge crowd has been drawn for this, the first public introduction of the next computer, to be explained and demonstrated by its visionary creator, Steve Jobs. The evening's program will begin with a welcome and introduction by Jonathan Rutenberg, president of the Boston Computer Society.
So it is really a great honor and a pleasure to introduce to you Steve Jobs and Next.
We see a complex molecule revolving on the right, Next logo with clouds billowing about it. Steve Jobs appears at the podium. The spotlight comes on and picks him up, dressed in a dark blue business suit, white shirt, red pattern tie, standing solo on this huge stage, the Next logo emblazoned on the screen high over his head. The spotlight on Steve Jobs in a totally darkened symphony hall.
Good evening. Thanks for inviting us out here. Jonathan called up and asked us if we would come out and tell you about our new computer. And so we brought basically what we did at our introduction out here, and we thought we'd go through it tonight with you. But rather than just tell you what we did, we want to go a little bit deeper and tell you why we did what we did, and some of the thinking behind it, to see if you agree, and so at least you'll understand it. So we'd like to get started. So that's all we have tonight. We have some demos in the other room, and the most exciting thing to me about this all is I think as we move this out into the hands of creative people like you, you're going to make some encores that we haven't even dreamed of yet. Thank you very much.
A standing ovation for Steve Jobs. Some people are getting up to go out and get a space in the room, but many are just standing here in Symphony Hall and applauding. Lights come back up. BCS President Jonathan Rutenberg comes up.
Computer industry, I knew 2 years ago it was extremely terrific, and it sure was. I just want to remind you all before you leave that the demonstration rooms are now open on both the first and second floors at the back of the hall. They will be open until 10:30, but we will...
I'm Charles Mann. Thank you so much for your interest in the Powersharing series.